Ahoy, and welcome. This is Admiral. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. That opening from A Tale of Two Cities sums up some of my thoughts about recent game announcements, although I know I'm more optimistic than some. So I've got good news, bad news, and ugly news, although all three may be old news to forum fans and video viewers who saw this information earlier than I did. The good news is that the DLC does include the Khitans and Jurchens as predicted, and they both look fairly interesting, and of course have tons of fantastic new graphics, as discussed before. Being at least partially right about the DLC and having at least those two interesting and highly requested new civilizations revealed does help assuage some of the disappointment of not having other expectations pan out, which is where the other types of news come in. For whatever reason, the developers decided that the other three civilizations should be pre-medieval Chinese factions. The Shu, Wei, and Wu from the Three Kingdoms era, approximately 220 to 280 AD, and that those civilizations should be available in ranked.
You serious?
To be blunt, I think this was a terrible choice and avoidable mistake, given that a similar amount of effort could have given us the Tanguts, whose unique unit and castle were shown in the early promo images, as well as Tibetans, Bais, or other highly requested medieval civilizations that would have been appropriate for a Sinosphere DLC. Surprises are great and all, but sometimes the most obvious answer is also the best one. And it's a shame, because the development team is obviously very technically competent and creative, and adding those civilizations instead of something so experimental would have been such an easy win for everyone, and would have made this a shoo-in for the best DLC since the Conqueror's expansion. So I'm very surprised they didn't take that opportunity, and instead decided to take a big risk without such an obvious payoff. Prior to today's announcement, there had been some speculation that one or more of the civilizations might be a Three Kingdoms civilization. But given that all 5 civilizations were announced to be playable in ranked, most of us took that to mean that the 5 civs would all be within the existing medieval time frame, which just seems like common sense to me, as opposed to going backwards in time to add several Chinese split civilizations instead. There's also this statement from the lead developer that unless I'm being disingenuous or playing word games, I can only interpret as specifically excluding Three Kingdoms civilizations, since all 3 of them are factions that are currently covered by the existing Chinese civilization, to the extent that anything out of the medieval period is represented by existing civilizations.
The Chinese, I wouldn't say is split. Indians was definitely a split. The Chinese civ is still there. We're not splitting the Chinese civilization. There is just more China-related content, let's put it like that. But the Chinese civ as it is, it will evolve a bit, it will change a bit, but it is the Chinese. And then there's 5 civs around that. Yeah.
Now, I don't think that was intentional, but I do think that the common understanding of splitting a civilization includes not just taking a scalpel to the original civilization, but also adding one or more civilizations currently covered under existing civilizations, or adding other factions to cover different time periods of the same civilization. So I'm personally not a fan of the precedent this sets in terms of extending the timeline and splitting existing civilizations on the basis of time frames and short-lived kingdoms or political factions. Now make no mistake, the Three Kingdoms era is fascinating and rightly popular as a matter of history, and for its representation in other games, and I have no problem with it being brought into AoE2. But I do think that it would have been so much better as an independent Chronicle-style DLC, or even something like Victors and Vanquished, with variations of the existing Chinese civilization and new units to represent the Three Kingdoms. That way, it wouldn't have subverted the expectations of those hoping for more medieval East Asian content, and could have still been brought to the game for the many interested, without eating into the design space of the base game and diluting the integrity of the more standard designs and time frame of the existing civilizations. I'm not totally opposed to reasonably extending the game's timeline a little bit in either direction, but I think this is only something that should be considered after a dozen or so timeline-appropriate civilizations are added, and that the base game should maintain an explicitly medieval focus, even if a few civilizations play it close to the edge. While I'm certainly open to appreciating the new Three Kingdoms content on its own terms, It would have been so much cleaner if it had been saved for its own DLC and game mode. Even the design of the Three Kingdoms civs, while not as radical as Chronicle civs, doesn't seem like the best fit for the existing medieval civilizations, and adding actual heroes to ranked play is probably crazier than anything I've ever proposed on this channel. I'm all for experimental content and boundary pushing, but I definitely think that some of it is better suited to its own game mode, and isn't the best fit for ranked civilizations without at least a trial period. And throwing these antiquity civilizations into a mishmash with medieval civs creates unnecessary friction and resentment, and diminishes some of the enthusiasm that I might have otherwise had for properly presented standalone Three Kingdoms content. Now, I don't want to dwell on this more than is necessary, and personally I'm probably quite a bit less upset about this than most. As for the most part, I've found that as a content creator, I'm more prone to a more dispassionate, analytical, and mellow mood, and I always try to navigate out of the doldrums as quickly as possible. But I do think that this was a tremendous unforced error, and a completely unnecessary and avoidable subversion of expectations. And it's unfortunate that those who have worked so hard on this project will likely not be as appreciated as if their work had been packaged more fittingly, and if communication had been better. And those fans who are justifiably displeased absolutely deserve to have their concerns amplified and addressed. Splitting this into two DLCs, one a smaller medieval DLC with Jurchens and Khitans, and the other a Chronicle-style Three Kingdoms spin-off, would have preserved all of the advantages of the content we're getting, while avoiding most of the rocky reefs of disappointment.
A small price to pay for salvation.
Of course, adding 5 all-new medieval Sinosphere civilizations, including Tibetans and Tanguts, would have been even better, but given that that was not the plan, I would have gone out of my way to set expectations for a modest medieval Asian DLC, in addition to the more experimental, time-bending Three Kingdoms project. As it is, the DLC may unfortunately end up as a perfect example of a bizarre compromise that tries to please everyone, but ends up with the opposite effect. Sometimes it's better to stick to a proven formula with a few surprises, rather than try to push all of the boundaries all the time. The paradox of this tone-deaf combination is that it comes on the heels of one of the best examples of listening to the community in recent memory, with the stunning and spectacular addition of unique castle graphics, regional monks and monasteries, and elite unique unit graphics, which thankfully we can appreciate for free whether or not we like the DLC. So I'm definitely torn by the reveal of this DLC, and while optimistic and appreciative of the new free content, the conglomerate nature of the DLC itself looks like a masterclass in failing to understand the community and not setting proper expectations. Or maybe it's just a gamble on ignoring the vocal online portion of the community, and hoping to hit the mark among the mass of more casual fans. Of course, I'm just some guy who makes videos on the internet.com, but from what I see on the official forums as well as Reddit, which is usually far more optimistic, there are a great many who share these concerns. And I sure hope that DLC will be split or tweaked in the most satisfactory way possible to make the most of the developers' hard work and the fans' anticipation, but I'm not holding my breath. And I wanted to knock this video out of the way and address the elephant in the room before covering the more positive and exciting aspects of the DLC. But I'm curious what my viewers think about this situation, and please be sure to vote in the poll I've posted on the subject. This has been me wondering how and why we got Wei, Wu, and Chu, and what we're gonna do. Till next time.